This is the only room in the whole house that is virtually untouched.
We are Mike and Jeannie, and we restore old houses. In 2021, we moved to South Carolina and bought a 120-year-old Victorian house. Follow along as we put the polish back on this Victorian masterpiece.
Today's program is sponsored by the generous support of our patrons. Your support helps to further our historic preservation efforts. For more information, visit patreon.com/1834 Restoration House. Welcome back to 1834 Restoration House.
We are upstairs in one of the bedrooms that we've worked on before. If you've watched our previous videos, you'll recognize this is the room where we did some paint stripping on the woodwork and the ceiling above. We also stripped the wallpaper out and we redid the plaster in this room. It was quite the ordeal, but we got it done. We were thinking this would be a good day to come up here and do some more work because it's cool outside.
This past winter, we did work a little bit on stripping the paint. You can see down here, we did one of these baseboards. The rest of them still need attention, but we strip it with the speed heater. And over here, you can see that we have the crown moldings are done. They do need a little bit of detailed attention still. And part of the ceiling, we've got to finish that part with the speed heater still. We did get the mantle completely done. It is all stripped and shellacked, and I think it looks beautiful. We have the doors to finish, and we also have all the window trims. So we got a bit of work to do still.
There are several ways that you can strip paint off of a historic house, and the two major ones are chemical stripper and heat stripping. And we chose heat stripping for some very specific reasons. Heat can penetrate deep down through all the paint layers. So if you've got a really thick film of paint, this will go down deep into it. And what that does is it breaks the physical and chemical bond between the paint and the woodwork and allows you to scrape it right off right now without any waiting time. With stripper, you have to put it on, cover it up, and then you have to wait 24 hours for it to do its job. And a lot of times, specifically on really thick paint films, you're not going to be able to get clear down to the base of the wood, and you may end up having to go back and add more stripper and do it over again. So we don't like doing things twice. I like to do it once and be done with it. So the heat stripper is the best choice for us. The other thing is that there are no chemicals involved. We don't have to buy the chemicals. We don't have to breathe the chemicals. And we don't have to worry about chemical residue on our woodwork. So those are the basic reasons why we do what we do. This is the Speed Heater Cobra, and it puts out an intense beam, very focused, of infrared heat. In fact, I can feel it here. It's really, really hot. Kind of like a barbecue with briquettes. It's exactly the same idea. The briquettes radiate heat, cooks your food. So in this case, what I want to do is heat up the paint without damaging the woodwork, and so I've got to be careful not to get it too hot. But typically, just a few seconds on there is enough to soften it up and then scrape it off. See that? It just comes right off of there, nice and easy. Typically, we do this kind of work in the winter where it's cold, and I have to wait a little bit longer and work harder to heat up the woodwork. But today is a pretty warm day, so it doesn't take much time at all. So I just very carefully just go through like that and scrape it off. Heat and scrape, heat and scrape. Okay, that time I didn't quite get it warm enough. But we've taken off some incredibly thick paint films with this stuff with no trouble whatsoever. It just goes right down through it. But I mentioned, though, that the danger of this, you really have to be careful, is not to scorch your woodwork, because that is a very real possibility, and we don't want that. So we just be very careful with it. Some other questions we've had in the past. I know there's a lot of new viewers, which is why I'm going over this again. Some will say, well, why don't you heat your next area while you're scraping one? And if you're not really fast and efficient, there's that ever-present danger of scorching the wood. And once you scorch that wood, it's very hard to get it unscorched. So to me, it's not worth the extra time savings to try to preheat wood while you're scraping on something else, because I don't know about you, but I can't really focus on two things at the same time. It's kind of like walking and chewing gum. See how that just comes right off of there? My tool is shaped in different shapes. I've got rounds and I've got squares, and I can get this right down into the woodwork where I need it. It just gets the job done without any mess other than what's on the floor there. And if there is any lead in the paint, it doesn't vaporize the paint, and so there's no danger of breathing it, which is really, that's probably one of the biggest concerns about old house paint like this. You don't know if it has lead. It may or it may not. But if it does, and you use the speed heater on it, that paint will literally fall to the floor as a chip, which can then be swept up and vacuumed up and disposed of properly. So that's why we do this way. And I'm going to go ahead and just get to work here, and we'll come back in a few minutes and show you what we did. I spent some time very carefully stripping the paint off of this baseboard, and it still feels a little bit rough because it needs to be cleaned up with some Scotch-Brite, but that looks really good. You can see the natural wood color without the paint, and it still has that old-time patina to it. That'll look really wonderful under a fresh coat of shellac. This turns out to be my favorite tool for doing this. It's shaped like the Starfleet logo, but it does a good job of getting down here into these crevices here and on the quarter round. But for the flat stuff, I like to use this one. Shaped like a baseball diamond. So let's do the fun stuff first, which is the easy stuff. I'll just go ahead and get this warmed up. It starts to smoke a little bit. Come on, scrape. If I'm careful, I can keep enough heat on there to keep working it. Let me try a different tool here and see if that works a little better. With some heat here and a good sharp tool, it makes fast work a tough job. You might be sitting there thinking to yourself, wow, that looks like a lot of work and takes a lot of time. And you're absolutely right. It is a lot of work. It does take a lot of time. But house restoration, if it's done properly, isn't something you can rush through. You see a lot of these things on YouTube where people buy a house, they go in, they slather on a bunch of paint, and all of a sudden they call it good. And all you've done is just add yet one more coat to the multiple coats of paint that's already on that woodwork, and that's really not good for it. So good restoration, it's going to take some time. Remember, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon.
All right, this section here, I was able to get the top and I got the face. It took me about 30 minutes to do all that. Probably would take another 30 minutes to do all the detail work there. So, it's not bad, 1 hour per board. And, how many hours a day can you work on this stuff? Eventually it gets done. It doesn't go fast. It doesn't necessarily go easy. But if you take your time and do a good job, you can have something to be proud of. So the moral of the story is, if you buy a historic house, do not, I beg of you, please do not paint the woodwork if it's not painted. It makes so much trouble down the road to try to correct that and bring it back to what it was. So, since my legs and hips are killing me from sitting on the floor, I'm going to stand up a while and see if I can't strip some of this. So, I'll need this. I have red heat source and a good scraper, and let's just pick a spot and start going at it. Let's see what happens here. Now, see how the paint is bubbling up there? It doesn't take much. It starts to bubble. Now, I can just scrape that paint right off. No having to wait for chemical strippers. No fumes. And the only cost is a few pennies for electricity. Nice, gentle circular motions help a lot. Get that done. And just pull it right off. I love it. Now, if this wood had been allowed to sit without paint on it for all those years, it would have that beautiful dark patina like the other bedroom had. There it goes. I can tell it's ready when it starts to smoke a little bit and it bubbles up. Now there's a little bit of haze on there. We don't worry about that because we'll come back and clean that up later. It seems to help if I can keep the tool just a little bit back, and that keeps the heat on there and keeps it nice and soft. But here's what happens if I don't do that. I come back a couple of seconds later. See that? It doesn't want to come off. The paint has to be hot. And it just slips right off. This is about 1 hour's worth of work here using the speed heater and the scraper, and I managed to get a lot of the flat surfaces done. I still need to get into here. Now you may look at that and say, well, that doesn't look like much progress, but it is. This work takes time. It's tedious, it's tiring, and very rewarding when it's all finished. Sometimes people have good intentions when they go and slather white paint on historic woodwork, but really there's no good that comes of this. I've had to spend hours just trying to remove the paint off of here, and it's a lot of work. Now let me show you what it looks like without the paint. This side was never painted. This is original historic woodwork here, never painted, and fairly well protected from sunlight, so it still has its old color. Here's a quick update on where we are. This baseboard over here still needs some work done to it, but this baseboard here has been completely stripped, all the way behind me, and then back over there going over towards the closet door is completely stripped. I'll go back later and clean it up a little bit more. Now I've got to say, having done baseboards and having done the door, I would much rather be on the floor doing baseboards than trying to do the door, because it's got so many intricate details and everything. The more ornate the woodwork is, the harder it is to clean. But ultimately, at the end of the day, when it's all done, it always looks better. So I can't complain too much. When you're trying to strip paint off complicated shapes, you need complicated tools, and that's exactly what these are. These are the speed heater system tools that came with our speed heater Cobra, and each one's a little bit different. Using these together, it's possible to unpaint pretty much anything. So I'm going to start with this one. This has probably become my favorite tool just because it's got the sharp points, and it's really good about getting into tight spots like this. So I've got a quarter round right here, and it's right up against the floor, it's right up against the baseboard. But I found that by using this point here, I can get right down in here this tight spot, and I can flip it over and use the opposite point to get into that tight spot. So I can get pretty much the top, and I can get the side. But what it doesn't do is get the middle. So I'll show you how we fix that. So let's start with this. I'll go ahead and heat it up, get it going. It only takes a few seconds. So now I can just come in here with that sharp tip. And while I'm doing that, I've got the heat held back a little ways so I don't scorch it, hopefully. But I get the bottom, I flip it over, and I'll use that on the opposite corner. See how it takes that out. But like I said, I can't really get the middle because of the way this is shaped, and it ends up hitting the floor before I can get it angled down enough. The other nice thing about this is if there's a little bit of a gap, I can usually get the paint out of there. But in this case,
the wood wasn't completely sealed all the way down against the baseboard. So when they painted it, some of that paint oozed down in there, and that paint's not coming out or anything. But there is a way to fix that later, which I'll show you later on when we get to that point. So I'll put this tool down, and I'll grab this tool. I have one edge here which is flat, and that works really good for getting these quarter rounds. So I'll go ahead, warm it back up, and then I just take my flat spot and just kind of roll it down as I'm scraping. And see how it just takes that paint right off of there. And that's how I do it. I just keep doing that all the way down. The key here is heat control. We don't want it too hot that we scorch the wood, but we need it hot enough to keep the paint soft. And I found that if I'm really careful, I can hold the speed heater back just a little bit and keep the area hot without getting too hot. Okay, now we got to come back over here, and I have to reheat that because it's already cooled off. So I'll just do like that, get it warm, and then start pulling it back. See that? This is definitely latex paint that I'm pulling off of here. It has a rubbery feel to it, and oil-based paint doesn't do that. So this is definitely a modern paint that somebody put on. Okay, switch tools, come back and do it again. I'm just going to pull the excess out of there so I don't light it on fire, because this thing will burn stuff. Okay. Aside from a little bit of touch up here in the corner, it is done. what a big mess. There are paint blotches all over the place. And this is not going to get 100% of the paint every time, but it's going to get the majority of it. So what I'm doing is just taking off as much as I can, and then we'll come back later and we'll do a little bit of polish and see if we can get the rest of that off of there. But let me see if I can get some of these little details right now so you can see what's happening. So I've got my sharp pointed scraper that allows me to get into places that are really tight like this. So I just heat it up, scrape it off. But I'm also able to get some flat areas too, which is nice. I also have a semi-blunt tip, which I can use to get things like this. So by using different points on the same tool, I can really get a lot of work done without changing. What takes somebody maybe 10 minutes worth of work with a paintbrush ends up taking many hours to undo that. We've been working on this room for months now, and it started out having this yellow wallpaper in here, and it looked pretty good, but we realized that the paper was falling off in places, and so we went ahead and pulled it down. That led to the discovery of major cracking in the plaster and just a really rough texture. And so we corrected that by replastering the room. We actually top coated the plaster and repaired it rather than completely replacing it. And I think it turned out really well, and we've turned our attention back to the woodwork. If you look up above me here, you'll see the ceiling had been painted with latex paint at some point in the past, or not too distant past, we're not sure. But that's beadboard, and as you can see, there's a lot of detail work up there. Taking off the paint from the flat work, that's the easy part, but getting into those grooves and taking that all out, that's going to be a challenge. But is it worth it? You might sit there and say, well, yeah, it's probably not worth it. But let me show you something. Come on. I'm in the upstairs hallway, and I wanted to show you the ceiling up here. This is completely original. That is 122-year-old wood up there that's never been painted, and it's absolutely original, unrestored woodwork. That is how it's supposed to look.
This is the only room in the whole house that is virtually untouched. None of the woodwork has been painted. The only thing that has changed has been the wallpaper, but not bad. It's not too bad. I love the dark colored wood. This is what we're trying to go for in all of the house. Now this has darkened only because of the sunlight coming in. Inside you can see the original wood. It's a little bit lighter, but it's still beautiful. The fireplace, again, has not been altered. It's got the tiles, it's got all the ironwork, and it is the only fireplace in the entire house that has all of its pieces. It's amazing. And then we have the gorgeous ceiling up there. Absolutely beautiful. This is what we're going to try and accomplish throughout the entire house, is trying to get everything to be this darker colored wood and real, not painted.
This door looks like it has a disease. I think it's the coming out from under paint after decades disease, but I'll come back here with a scrubby and some solvent and see if I can't get that cleaned up.
It'll look much better after that.
Oh yeah, it's incredible. Just the difference of what we've done. I got the baseboards down here stripped, the door stripped, and you combine that with the fireplace that's now restored,
Yes.
and new plaster on the walls. It'll make a nice base for future wallpaper.
It's gonna be a beautiful room.
Yes. Yes.
Absolutely beautiful.
And we're going to try to finish this room before we start another room. Because I know myself, if I go start something else, then I'll never get back to this one. So we're going to make sure this gets done. But my hips are killing me because I've been sitting cross-legged all morning and I'm not 13 anymore. So I'm going to quit for now.
Sounds good. Well, thank you for watching 1834 Restoration House.